When my son Michael asked me for the corporate credit card for a supposedly urgent dental treatment, I never imagined that those $95,000 would end up building a luxury pool and a high-end grill at his father-in-law's house. Nor did I imagine that moment would mark the end of our father and son relationship forever. Before we continue, subscribe and hit the bell icon because we post new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city and state you are watching from. My name is William Miller. I am 63 years old, and for 40 of them, I built a business empire that is today worth nearly $5 million. 3 companies' real estate properties in 4 American cities, and an impeccable reputation in the wholesale distribution sector. Everything I have, I achieved with sweat, strategy, and sacrifice. I always thought my greatest achievement would be inheriting all of this to my son Michael. How wrong I was. It was March 16th, 2024, a Saturday morning. I remember the date exactly because that day marked 40 years since I founded my first company, Miller Distributions. I was in my home office reviewing contracts when Michael appeared at the door. My son Michael Miller was 38 years old and had been working as an administrator in the family business for 5 years. I paid him a generous salary of $15,000 a month, plus an additional allowance of $3,000 for personal expenses that I established when he and his wife, Sarah, bought their condo. "Dad, I need to talk to you urgently," he said with a cracking voice. I noticed immediately that something was wrong. Michael avoided my gaze. His hands were trembling slightly, and he licked his lips every few seconds. 40 years in business taught me to read people's body language, and my son was nervous. Very nervous. "Sure, sit down." "What is going on?" I replied, closing the document folder. Michael sat on the edge of the chair, leaning forward. "I have a serious dental problem. My dentist, Dr. Stevenson, at the Advanced Dental Clinic downtown, says I need specialized implants urgently. I have an infection that could spread, and the treatment must start on Monday without fail." I watched him carefully. "And what is the problem? You have private health insurance, the best there is." "The insurance does not cover this type of imported implant," he explained quickly, pulling some folded papers from his pocket. "They are next-generation titanium, made in Switzerland. The complete treatment costs around $95,000, and the clinic demands payment in advance. I do not have that amount available right now." $95,000. A considerable amount, but not impossible for someone earning $18,000 a month between salary and allowance. "Why don't you have enough savings, Michael? You have had a stable income for years." I saw him blush. "We have had unforeseen expenses. The condo renovation, Sarah's new car, the vacation to Hawaii last year. You know how it is." Yes, I knew how it was. My son and my daughter-in-law, Sarah, lived beyond their means, constantly buying unnecessary luxuries. But he was my son, my only offspring, and I thought perhaps it was time to teach him financial responsibility in another way. "I am going to propose something," I said, leaning back in my leather chair. "I will lend you the corporate card for the treatment, but I want all the receipts and detailed invoices, and we will establish a payment plan where you deduct $2,000 a month from your salary until the debt is settled. Does that seem fair?" I expected resistance or negotiation, but Michael nodded immediately. Too immediately. "Perfect, Dad. Thank you so much. I promise I will pay back every cent." He handed me the papers he had taken out. They were documents with the letterhead of the Advanced Dental Clinic, detailed estimates, dental x-rays. Everything looked legitimate at first glance, but that nervousness, that rush, that excessive relief when I accepted, something in my gut screamed that something did not add up. I opened my desk drawer and took out the American Express Platinum corporate card. Before handing it to him, I held it for a few seconds, looking him directly in the eyes. "Michael, this card has a limit of $200,000 and is connected directly to the main account of Miller Distributions. It is a huge responsibility. Are you sure you will only use it for the dental treatment?" "Completely sure, Dad. Only for that," he replied without hesitation, reaching out his hand. I handed him the card. He put it in his wallet with trembling hands and stood up quickly. I have to go. Sarah is waiting for me. Thanks again, Dad. You are the best. He gave me a brief hug and left the office, practically running. I remained alone, looking at the documents he had left on my desk. I reviewed them more carefully. The letterhead was correct. Dr. Stevenson's signature looked authentic, but there was something. I did not know exactly what. I turned on my computer and searched for the Advanced Dental Clinic. It existed, it had good reviews. Dr. Stevenson was listed on their staff. Everything seemed in order. But 40 years building companies taught me a fundamental lesson. Trust, but verify. Always. I opened the bank application on my computer and did something Michael was completely unaware of. I set up automatic alerts for every transaction made with that corporate card. Every time it was used, regardless of the amount, I would receive an immediate notification on my cell phone with the full details. Merchant amount, location, exact date and time. My son did not know it, but he had just become the protagonist of a test. A test about honesty, about trust, about whether the man I had raised really had the values I always tried to instill in him. As I put the documents in a new folder labeled Michael Dental, Treatment, March 2024, I felt a strange weight in my chest, a mixture of hope and foreboding. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped my suspicions were unfounded, a product of my cautious nature after decades dealing with dishonest suppliers and cheating partners. But deep down, very deep down, a little voice whispered to me that I had just opened a Pandora's box that would change my life forever. The first notification arrived on my cell phone on Monday, March 18th at 10:43 in the morning. I was in a meeting with suppliers when I felt the vibration in my pocket. I discreetly looked at the screen. American Express Platinum Charge, Ramos Construction Hardware, Oak Brook, Illinois, $5,000. $5,000 at a hardware store. In Oak Brook, not downtown where the dental clinic supposedly was. I maintained my composure, but my mind started working at full speed. Maybe the clinic had an agreement with some supplier for specialized materials. Maybe there was a logical explanation. I decided to wait and observe. 2 hours later, another vibration. American Express Platinum Charge, Premium Aqua Pools, Oak Brook, $13,500. $13,500 at a pool company. I felt my blood freeze in my veins, but outwardly I remained unperturbed. During that meeting, I closed a contract for $150,000, while inside the image I had of my own son began to crumble. When I got home that night, Linda, my wife of 39 years, noticed something was worrying me. "Are you okay, honey? You look distant," she asked while we were having dinner. Linda, the woman I had been married to for nearly 4 decades, knew me better than anyone. "Just tired." It was a long day at the office. I lied. I did not want to involve her until I was absolutely sure of what was happening. If my suspicions turned out to be unfounded, there was no point in worrying her unnecessarily. During the following days, the notifications continued to arrive with alarming frequency. On March 20th, Northern Landscaping, $9,000. On the 23rd, Lopez Building Materials, $6,500. On the 26th, Weber Grills Imports, $4,000. Every transaction was a dagger in my paternal trust, but also fuel for my determination. I kept a meticulous record in an encrypted spreadsheet on my personal computer. Date, time, establishment, amount, location. By the end of March, the sum amounted to $45,000. Not a single charge corresponded to dental clinics, medical laboratories, or health providers. On April 2nd, I called my old friend Mark Evans, a private investigator I had worked with on several corporate fraud cases during my business career. We met at his discreet office downtown. "William, it has been years," he greeted me with a firm handshake. Mark was 57 years old, with a buzz cut and eyes that missed no detail. "I need you to investigate someone strictly confidentially," I said, handing him a folder with all the recorded transactions. "It is my son, Michael." Mark reviewed the documents without changing his professional expression. After 30 years in the business, nothing surprised him. What do you need exactly? Discrete surveillance photographs of what he is doing with that money. All transactions point to Oak Brook, specifically a residential area. I want to know whose property my money is being spent on, and who the owner is. Do you have any suspicions? Mark asked, taking notes on his tablet. His father-in-law, Robert, lives in Oak Brook. 68 years old, retired from the banking sector. He always seemed like an ambitious man. Mark nodded. I will have weekly reports for you. Photographs, exact locations, activity schedules, everything documented. The reports started arriving punctually every Friday. The first one, dated April 9th, included 16 high-resolution photographs. The property was a 2-story house in a gated community. The tax records confirmed it belonged to Robert. The images showed construction trucks, workers installing metal structures, piles of materials stacked in the garden. The second report from April 16th was even more revealing. Photographs of Michael personally supervising the work, pointing out details to the workers, reviewing blueprints with the foreman. In one particularly clear image, my son appeared smiling next to Robert, while they inspected the huge hole excavated for the pool. Every Friday, the photographic dossier grew. Week after week, I saw how my company's money was transforming into luxuries for my in-laws' property. A concrete pool with an integrated heating system, a barbecue area with an imported stainless steel grill, a motorized aluminum pergola, premium artificial turf installed by specialists, automated irrigation system, LED garden lighting, an 8-person outdoor jacuzzi. Meanwhile, the transactions continued. In April, $33,000 more. In May, another $24,000. By mid-June, the total reached exactly $95,000. The fascinating thing was observing how Michael acted with total normality during that period. He came to the office on time-chaired meetings, presented reports as if nothing was happening. We even had dinner together as a family twice during those months. On both occasions, I watched him closely, looking for signs of guilt or remorse. Nothing. He chatted animatedly about business projects, laughed with his mother, acted like the exemplary son. Linda commented in May that Michael seemed especially happy lately. It must be because he finally solved that dental problem that bothered him so much, she added innocently. I nodded without saying a word, feeling the silent rage growing inside me. On June 18th, I received the final report from Mark. 48 pages documenting 3 months of activity. Photographs taken from multiple angles, intercepted invoices, conversations legally recorded from public spaces. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. That night alone in my office, I reviewed all the material for the third time. $95,000 of corporate funds systematically diverted to luxury improvements on someone else's property. My son had lied directly to my face, betrayed the trust placed in him, and used business resources to benefit his father-in-law, while I involuntarily financed his fraud. But the part that hurt the most was not the money. $95,000 was recoverable. What was truly devastating was discovering that I had raised someone capable of looking me in the eyes and lying to me without blinking for 3 consecutive months. I closed the folder and put it in my personal safe. It was not time to act yet. I needed additional information. I needed to fully understand the situation before executing my response. Because there was going to be a response. Meticulous, strategic, and relentless. My son did not know it yet, but he had just dug his own professional and family grave, and I had all the shovels documented photographically. I needed to understand the full picture before acting. The $95,000 were just symptoms. But what was the disease? Why had Michael chosen to betray me right now? Who had planted the seed of this idea? On June 20th, I hired a second investigator, Sylvia Stone, a specialist in financial investigations and digital tracking. If Mark was my eyes on the ground, Sylvia would be my magnifying glass on Robert's past. I want to know everything about this man, I explained during our initial meeting in a quiet cafe. Real economic situation, debts failed. investments, loans, mortgages, everything you can find legally. Sylvia was 42 with black hair and a tight bun and an impeccable reputation in business circles. "Give me a week," she replied simply. She did not need that long. 3 days later, on June 23rd, I received her preliminary report via encrypted email. I opened it in my home office with the door locked. Robert had worked 35 years at a regional bank until taking early retirement in 2020. Early retirement, which as Sylvia discovered, was actually a covert dismissal following irregularities in mortgage management. Nothing illegal enough to prosecute, but enough for the bank to prefer getting rid of him quietly. In 2022, Robert invested his entire savings, $250,000, in a real estate project that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. Ghost developers forged permits, non-existent construction. He lost everything, absolutely everything. But the truly revealing information came on page 7 of the report. Robert had turned to private lenders to maintain his standard of living. Sylvia attached photographs of documents obtained through contacts in commercial registries. 3 personal loans between 2022 and 2023, totaling $70,000 borrowed from a company called Eastern Quick Finance, known in certain circles as a front for loan shark operations. 24% annual interest, abusive clauses, documented threats when payments were delayed. It all fit. Robert desperately needed liquidity or assets to renegotiate with his creditors. A newly renovated house with a pool and improvements worth nearly $100,000 significantly increased its market value and his ability to obtain conventional mortgage refinancing, but that only explained Robert's motive. How had he convinced Michael to participate in the scheme? I asked Sylvia to dig deeper into communications. Legally, she could not intercept private messages, but she could analyze metadata, contact patterns, and recover information from corporate devices. Michael used a cell phone provided by the company, technically property of Miller Distributions. Sylvia obtained a limited court order under the justification of an internal audit for suspected corporate embezzlement. Judge Martinez, a serious magistrate who knew my business reputation, authorized access to the messaging records of the work device. On June 28th, Sylvia handed me complete transcripts on a USB drive. I locked myself in my personal study and began to read. Conversations between Michael and Robert since January 2020, 4 months before the alleged dental problem. Robert, January 14th. Michael, I need to talk to you about your and Sarah's future. The house where I live has huge appreciation potential. With some strategic improvements, its value could double. Michael, January 14th. What kind of improvements? Robert, January 14th. Pool quality outdoor area, professional landscaping. An investment of about $100,000 that would turn this property into a solid family asset. When I am gone, it will be yours. I kept reading, feeling my blood pressure rise. Robert, February 3rd. Your father has plenty of capital in that company. $5 million in assets for a single man. Don't you think you deserve access to resources that will eventually be yours? Michael, February 3rd. I don't know, Dad is always very strict with business accounts. Robert, February 3rd. Precisely why he has never taught you true financial autonomy. Smart parents empower their children. They don't keep them dependent their whole lives. The manipulation was systematic and psychologically sophisticated. Robert had identified exactly Michael's insecurities, his subordinate position in the company, his economic dependence on me, his need for validation as a capable adult man. Robert, February 25th. Think of this as an inheritance advance. You invest in family property that will belong to Sarah and you. Your father won't even notice it among all his business movements. And if he asks you, calmly explain that you decided to make a smart investment. Michael, February 25th. What if he gets mad? Robert, February 25th. Get mad because his son shows business initiative. That would be contradictory coming from a businessman. Besides, technically, you are not stealing. You are taking what morally already belongs to you. Reading those lines, I realized I had gravely underestimated Robert. He was not just an opportunistic in law, he was an experienced manipulator who had studied my son, identified his weak points, and exploited each one methodically. Later, I found the message that had probably inspired the dental treatment excuse. Robert, March 10th. You need a solid pretext to ask for access to corporate funds. Something urgent medical that justifies large amounts. How about a specialized dental treatment? I have an acquaintance at a clinic who can prepare convincing documentation. False documentation. The papers Michael had shown me were frauds, elaborated specifically to deceive me. I continued reading for hours. There were over 200 exchanged messages. Robert directing every step, Michael obediently executing. Sarah occasionally appearing in group conversations, choosing finishes and materials for her future family home. The most disturbing part came in a message from April 15th. Robert, April 15th. Your father is from another generation. For them, accumulating was success. For us, living well is success. You are simply modernizing the relationship between capital and quality of life. In 20 years, when you inherit everything, you will remember this moment as when you finally took control of your own destiny. I turned off the computer, feeling a mixture of controlled fury and deep sadness. My son had not woken up one morning deciding to rob me. He had been systematically convinced that taking my money was a legitimate act of adult emancipation, that I was the problem for not voluntarily handing over resources to finance his father-in-law's whims. Robert had transformed theft into a life philosophy. Now I fully understood what I was up against. Not just filial disloyalty, but months of psychological conditioning. Defeating this would require more than simple confrontation. It would require surgical strategy. I opened a new file on my computer and began to plan the next steps with the same methodology I used for complex business acquisitions. My counterattack would be devastating. On June 30th, a warm summer Monday, I hired the auditing firm Vega & Associates to perform an exhaustive inspection of all financial operations of Miller Distributions over the last 3 years. Officially, I presented it to the board as a routine review scheduled for ISO certification. No one suspected the true motive. The assigned auditor was Patricia Stone, a forensic accountant with 20 years of experience uncovering corporate fraud. Tall, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, and an almost supernatural ability to detect irregularities in mountains of numbers. Mr. Miller, I will need full access to accounting records, invoices, bank statements, payment authorizations, and correspondence with suppliers since January 2021. She explained during our first private meeting in my main office. You will have everything you request, I replied, handing her a folder. Pay special attention to transactions authorized by Michael Miller, Operations Administrator. Look for unusual patterns. Duplicate payments, suppliers that do not appear in our historical record. Patricia nodded professionally. Suspicion of systematic embezzlement. I suspect what I recently discovered is just the tip of the iceberg. For 2 weeks, Patricia and her team of 3 junior auditors set up in the adjacent boardroom, surrounded by filing cabinets, laptops, and towers of documentation. Michael passed by that room daily, visibly nervous, repeatedly asking me about the exact purpose of the audit. Standard procedure, I replied with glacial calm. Quality certification. Nothing to worry about if everything is in order. The expression on his face said otherwise. He knew something was not in order. The preliminary report arrived on July 16th. 32 pages of findings that confirmed my worst fears and added devastating revelations. Finding number 1. Between February 20 to 21 and May 20 to 24, Michael had approved payments to 5 non-existent suppliers for fictitious logistics consulting and route optimization services. Companies registered with fake addresses, bank accounts redirecting funds to shell companies. Total diverted $15,000. Finding number 2. Undeclared commissions received from 3 real suppliers in exchange for preferential contracts. Michael received between $500 and $1,000 a month in cash that he never reported fiscally, nor return to the company. Conservative estimate over 3 years, $6,000. Finding number 3, manipulation of inventory reports to justify inflated purchases of material that subsequently disappeared from records. Merchandise resold off the books. Estimated illicit profit $2,000 additional dollars. Total sum of misappropriations discovered by the audit, $23,000 exactly. Adding the $95,000 from the corporate card, my son had stolen $118,000 from me in total. Sitting at my desk that July afternoon, contemplating Patricia's report, I felt something close to physical nausea. It was not simply a momentary error of judgment or punctual weakness. Michael had been systematically stealing from me for 3 years while I blindly trusted him. I had raised a white-collar criminal. On July 18th, I called an urgent meeting with Albert Ross, my personal lawyer, for 15 years. Albert was 52, specialized in commercial law and economic crime, with an impeccable reputation in city courts. We met at his downtown office. I handed him 3 folders, one with the corporate card documentation, another with transcripts of messages between Michael and Robert III, with the full audit report. Albert reviewed everything meticulously for 40 minutes without saying a word. Finally, he leaned back in his leather chair and looked at me with a serious expression. "William, this is enough to destroy your son legally and professionally. We are talking about multiple crimes. Embezzlement, document forgery, continued fraud. We could get between 3 and 5 years of effective prison time." "I don't want vengeance," I clarified with a controlled voice. "I want justice. I want to recover what was stolen, and I want him to understand that actions have permanent consequences." Albert took notes on his yellow pad. "I propose a simultaneous triple strategy. First, a civil lawsuit for full restitution of $118,000, plus legal interest and moral damages. Second, justified dismissal with serious cause that voids severance and allows labor claims for breached fiduciary responsibility. Third, criminal complaint for aggravated embezzlement due to abuse of family and corporate trust." "Estimated process time?" I asked. "With the evidence you have gathered, we can accelerate everything. Civil lawsuit resolves in 6 months max, with a favorable sentence almost guaranteed. Labor dismissal is immediate, effective in 24 hours. Criminal process takes longer, between 12 and 18 months, but the threat will be enough to force an out-of-court settlement." I leaned back, thinking strategically. What happens if we offer an immediate out-of-court resolution? He signs a debt acknowledgement, judicially supervised payment plan, waiver of future claims. If he accepts, we archive the criminal case. If he refuses, we execute all 3 paths without mercy. Albert smiled slightly. "That is called intelligent legal pragmatism. You give him a chance to resolve this in a civilized manner, but with a sword of Damocles suspended over his head. If he complies, he avoids prison. If he misses a single payment, we reactivate everything automatically." "Exactly." We spent the next 3 hours designing complete legal documentation. Albert drafted a detailed out-of-court agreement. Explicit recognition of misappropriation of $118,000. Restitution plan in 100 monthly installments of $1,200 for 8 years and 4 months. Interest at 5% annually. Personal guarantees including preventive seizure of present and future assets. If Michael signed, he avoided jail but remained economically tied for almost a decade. If he refused, he faced simultaneous financial ruin, immediate firing, and probable criminal conviction. We also prepared documentation to transfer business administration to my brother Thomas. Contracts, powers of attorneys, statutory modifications. Everything ready to execute in a matter of hours when the moment arrived. "When do you want to move?" Albert asked while organizing folders. "Monday, July 23rd. Formal call in the boardroom at 9 in the morning. You present as legal representative. Full presentation of evidence. Offer of out-of-court agreement with a 48-hour limit for response. If he accepts, immediate signature before a notary. If he refuses, immediate execution of the 3 simultaneous legal strategies. Albert extended his hand. It will be devastating. I shook his hand firmly. It has to be. I left that office with 3 folders under my arm containing enough legal arsenals to annihilate my own son's professional life. I felt a huge weight on my chest, but also absolute clarity. 40 years building companies taught me that misplaced sentimentality destroys organizations. Business requires difficult decisions based on principles, not emotions. Michael had violated a fundamental principle: loyalty. The consequences would be proportional to the betrayal. Monday, July 23rd, 2024 dawned clear over the city. I arrived at the offices of Miller Distributions at 7:32 hours earlier than usual. Albert was already waiting for me in the underground parking lot with his brown leather briefcase containing all the prepared documentation. "Good morning, William." "Ready?" he asked in a serene but serious tone. "As ready as one can be to destroy their own son's career," I replied with contained bitterness. We went up to the 3rd floor where the main boardroom was. We spent the next hour setting up the presentation. Albert connected his laptop to the wall projector. I organized 3 complete sets of labeled folders on the table: evidence, corporate card, internal audit Vega and Associates, transcripts, communications. At 8:50, I sent a message from my cell phone to Michael. "Urgent meeting, main boardroom, now." 3 minutes later, I heard his accelerated steps down the hallway. He opened the door and entered with a confused expression that transformed into alarm upon seeing Albert. "Dad, what is happening? Why is your lawyer here?" "Sit down, Michael," I ordered, pointing to the chair in front of me. He sat slowly, looking nervously between Albert and me. I could see his mind working frantically, trying to anticipate what was coming. Albert took the projector remote control. "Good morning, Michael. I am Albert Ross, legal representative, for your father and Miller Distributions. This meeting is formal, and everything said here will be recorded in a notarized act." The screen lit up showing the first slide: Investigation for Misappropriation. Case: Michael Miller. Michael paled instantly. What is this? Silence, I said with a glacial voice. "Now we will speak. You will listen." Albert advanced to the next slide, showing the corporate card statement. "On March 16th of this year, you asked your father for access to the corporate card, alleging an urgent need for dental treatment for an amount of approximately $95,000. Is that correct?" Michael swallowed visibly. "Yes, but—" I said, "Listen," I interrupted sharply. Albert continued. "During the following 3 months, you made charges for a total amount of $95,000. None of these transactions correspond to dental clinics, medical labs, or health providers." The screen now showed a detailed list: Ramos Construction Hardware, Premium Aqua Pools, Northern Landscaping, Weber Grills Imports, Lopez Building Materials. Every transaction with date, time, exact location, and amount. Michael tried to speak, but his voice came out broken. "Dad, can I explain?" "Explain what exactly?" I asked, leaning forward. "Explain how you looked at my face and lied deliberately. Explain how you used corporate funds to finance luxury renovations on Robert's property." Albert then projected Mark's photographs. Sharp images of the house in Oakbrook, pool under construction, Michael supervising works, Robert inspecting installations next to my son, imported grill being assembled, landscapers installing artificial turf. These photographs were taken between April and June during an authorized private investigation. Albert explained with a professional tone. They document the real destination of the misappropriated money. Michael had started to shake. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair until his knuckles turned white. But we were not finished. Albert advanced, showing screenshots of the messages between Michael and Robert. Complete conversations projected on the 10-foot wall. Every incriminating phrase amplified, impossible to deny. "Your father has plenty of capital in that company. You are taking what morally already belongs to you. You need a solid pretext to ask for access to corporate funds." Michael buried his head in his hands. "Oh my God, Dad, We are not finished yet, I interrupted coldly. Show him the audit report, Albert. The next section was devastating. Patricia Stone had prepared an executive summary with graphs tables and photographic documentation. Ghost suppliers forged invoices, illegal commissions, inventory manipulation, 3 years of systematic criminal activity, $23,000 additional dollars misappropriated through continued fraud. Total sum of stolen corporate funds, $118,000. Exactly, concluded Albert. Multiple crimes, aggravated misappropriation, document forgery, continued fraud, and unfair administration. Michael had started crying silently. Tears ran down his cheeks, but he made no sound. I remained impassive. 40 years in business taught me not to yield to emotional manipulations. Albert placed 3 sealed folders on the table in front of Michael. Here we have prepared 3 simultaneous legal processes. Red folder, civil lawsuit for full restitution, plus damages and interest total, claimed $140,000. Blue folder, immediate justified dismissal with serious cause for misappropriation without severance and with claim for fiduciary responsibility. Black folder, criminal complaint for continued crime of misappropriation aggravated by abuse of family trust penalty requested between 3 and 5 years of effective prison. Michael looked up, eyes red, voice broken. Dad, please. I raised my hand, silencing him. I'm going to offer you something you do not deserve. An opportunity to resolve this out of court. One single opportunity. 30 seconds to decide. Albert slid a 4th folder, this one green across the table. Out of court agreement, you recognize in writing misappropriation of $118,000. You establish a restitution plan. $1,200 monthly for 100 months, 8 years and 4 months of payments, interest at 5% annually, guarantees via preventive seizure of all your present and future assets, irrevocable waiver of labor claims. If you accept and comply, we archive the criminal process. If you miss a single payment, we automatically reactivate all 3 legal paths without a new opportunity. I placed a Mont Blanc pen on the green folder. Sign now, or in an hour you will be fired, sued, and criminally denounced. Decide. Michael was shaking completely. He looked at the 4 folders, then at Albert, finally at me, looking for some trace of paternal compassion. He found none. With trembling hands, he opened the green folder. He read the clauses superficially. He took the pen. Dad, I am so sorry, he whispered before signing. Your apologies are irrelevant, I replied with an icy voice. Your signature is the only thing that matters. He signed in 3 indicated places. Albert immediately extracted the documents and put them in his briefcase. Effective from this moment, declared Albert. Notary will certify signatures this afternoon. First installment due, August 23rd. Any delay exceeding 72 hours activates total breach clause. I stood up, gathering the remaining 3 folders. Now get out of my company and out of my sight. Michael stood up, staggering slightly. He walked toward the door with unsure steps. Before leaving, he turned one last time. Dad, do not call me that again, I said without looking at him. You lost that right when you chose to betray me. The door closed, leaving me alone with Albert. The silence was absolute for several seconds. Phase 1 complete, said Albert finally. Proceed with Phase 2. I nodded. Business transfer to Thomas immediately. 3 hours after Michael left that room, Thomas Miller parked his gray sedan in the company lot. My younger brother was 58, a retired industrial engineer with a methodical character and unbreakable honesty that contrasted painfully with the betrayal recently discovered. I received him in my private office with Albert. Thomas wore a sky blue shirt and beige pants, looking confused but attentive. William, your message said it was urgent and involves the future of the company, he said, sitting across from my desk. What is going on? I handed him a summarized version of the audit report, 10 pages condensing the essential. Misappropriation, systematic fraud, $118,000, stolen over months. Thomas read slowly, his expression transitioning from surprise to disbelief, and finally controlled indignation. He had known Michael since he was born, seen him grow up, attended his wedding. What he read completely contradicted the image of the nephew he thought he knew. Good God. William, how could he do this? That question no longer matters, I replied with a pragmatic tone. What matters now is protecting what I built for 40 years. I need someone of absolute trust administering operations. Someone with solid principles, technical capacity, and proven loyalty. Thomas looked at me, understanding where the conversation was going. Are you offering me the position of general manager? I'm handing it to you, I corrected. Albert has prepared all contracts. Immediate effective transfer. Salary of $12,000 a month, performance bonuses. 15% minority participation in annual profits. Full authority over operations hiring and corporate finances. My brother remained silent, processing the proposal. Finally, he asked, and Michael? Michael signed a debt acknowledgement and restitution plan this morning. He is no longer part of this organization, nor my life. That door closed permanently. Albert intervened, placing a thick folder on the desk. Thomas, here are appointment contracts, powers of attorney, statutory modifications, access to corporate bank accounts, and complete documentation of current operations. If you accept, we go right now before a notary to formalize everything legally. In 3 hours, you will be officially in command. Thomas took the folder, opened it, reviewed the first pages. Then he looked directly at me. Brother, you know you can count on me always. But this means your relationship with Michael is completely destroyed. Are you sure completely? I affirmed without hesitation. When someone steals from you, looking you in the eyes for months, they stop being family. They become a simple criminal who coincidentally shares your last name. Thomas nodded gravely. Then I accept. I will make this company prosper in a way that you never doubt your decision. We shook hands, sealing something deeper than a labor contract. It was a transfer of legacy, an act of radical trust after devastating betrayal. We left the three of us toward the notary downtown. For 90 minutes, we signed documents, certified powers, registered corporate changes. At 3:15 that afternoon of July 23rd, Thomas Miller was officially general manager of Miller Distributions, with full powers. We returned to the office to execute the next phase. Systematic dismantling of all privileges Michael had enjoyed for years. First action, cancellation of access to corporate bank accounts. I called the bank manager directly. Effective immediately. Michael Miller is removed from all accounts, cards, and authorizations associated with Miller Distributions. Only additional authorized person from now on, Thomas Miller. In 15 minutes, Michael lost access to corporate liquidity he had used for personal expenses for years. Second action, cancellation of personal allowance. I called the chief accountant. Transfer of $3,000 monthly to Michael Miller's personal account is suspended permanently. Effective today, no exceptions. $3,000 monthly that Michael spent on expensive restaurants, brand clothes, and various whims. Evaporated. Third action, cancellation of premium health insurance. I contacted the insurance provider. Corporate policy number 74321. Beneficiary Michael Miller and spouse Sarah. Cancel coverage effective end of month. No renewal. The insurance cost them $800 a month. In 30 days, they would have to pay for private insurance out of their pocket. Fourth action, recovery of corporate apartment. Michael and Sarah lived in a condo owned by the company in a high-end district, valued at $500,000. Albert drafted an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate. After that period, we proceed judicially. Thomas personally delivered the notice in a sealed envelope to the building security, with instructions to give it to Michael that same afternoon. Fifth action, blocking of investment fund. Years ago, I had established a savings and investment account destined eventually for Michael as an inheritance advance, $500,000 in index funds and stocks. I contacted my financial advisor. Investment account number A, T4789. Beneficiary designated Michael Miller. I modify beneficiary to a charitable foundation I will establish soon. Document it notarially. $500,000 that Michael considered practically his redirected toward causes that really deserve support. Sixth action, recovery of corporate vehicle. Michael drove a BMW 5 Series property of the company valued at $75,000. Thomas called a towing company. I need recovery of a corporate vehicle, located probably in Oak Brook. Full legal authorization. Bring it to our facilities tonight. At 8 in the evening, the BMW was parked in our corporate garage. Michael would have to use public transport or buy a car with money he no longer had. When we finished, it was almost 9 at night. In exactly 6 hours, we had executed a complete administrative transfer and total dismantling of the privileged life Michael had built on my trust. Thomas, exhausted but satisfied, was putting documentation in new binders. "It is impressive how fast everything can change," he commented. "Building takes decades. Destroying takes hours," I replied with deep tiredness. "That is how everything works in this life." That night, driving home, I received a call from Linda. Her voice sounded broken. She had been crying. "William Michael just arrived. He is destroyed. He says you took everything from him. Please, can we talk?" "Tomorrow," I said simply. "Today was a very long day." I hung up knowing that the conversation with my wife would be almost as difficult as the confrontation with my son. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, I just wanted silence. The conversation with Linda happened the next morning, July 24th, on the terrace of our house. She had passed the night almost without sleeping, alternating between maternal support toward Michael and understanding the pain I was going through. She poured coffee in silence. Her hands trembled slightly, holding the pot. "Michael came last night," she began with a careful voice. "He arrived destroyed, crying like I haven't seen since he was a child. He says he made a terrible mistake and would do anything to fix it." I drank my coffee without answering. I had anticipated exactly this conversation. "William, I know what he did is unforgivable. I understand your fury, but he is our son, our only son." Her voice cracked slightly. "Is there no possibility of eventually—" "No," I replied with absolute firmness. "What Michael destroyed is not rebuilt with apologies or tears. He stole $118,000. He lied to me for months, looking me directly in the eyes. That was not a mistake, Linda. It was a conscious decision repeated every day for 4 months." Linda wiped her eyes with a cloth napkin. "I know you are completely right, but I am his mother. I cannot simply—" "I'm not asking you to," I interrupted with a softer tone. "You are his mother. That bond is yours to handle as you consider appropriate. But I am no longer his father in any sense that matters. That relationship died the moment he chose to betray me." We remained in silence for several minutes. Birds sang in the garden. The morning was beautiful, contrasting brutally with the family tragedy we were going through. "What is going to happen to them?" Linda asked finally. "Michael lost his job, his salary, the apartment where they live. What must happen will happen. They will face real consequences of adult decisions. Michael is 38. He is not a confused teenager. He will find a job according to his real capabilities, without my influence protecting him. He will pay his debt monthly as he agreed. He will learn what it means to live without a safety net." Linda nodded slowly, accepting reality, even though it hurt. "Sarah is furious. She called me screaming that you destroyed her marriage, that you are vindictive and cruel." I smiled bitterly. "Of course she is. Sarah married access to wealth, not Michael, really. Now she discovers her husband, without my backing, is an ordinary employee with huge debts. Her rage is purely material." During the following days, the consequences of the collapse became visible in increasingly concrete ways. On July 28th, Michael got a job at a medium-sized logistics company as a warehouse supervisor. Salary $3,000 a month, an 80% reduction compared to what he earned in my company. Of that salary, $1,200 would go directly to pay his debt to me. He had $1,800 a month left to survive. Sarah, who had never worked formally, had to accept a position as an administrative assistant at a veterinary clinic for $1,500 a month. Between both $3,300 net after paying the debt. In the city, an amount barely sufficient for modest rent and basic subsistence. On August 5th, they had to leave the luxury condo. Thomas supervised the key handover personally. He told me Sarah cried while packing belongings in boxes, cursing my name repeatedly. They moved to a 600-square-foot apartment in a working-class neighborhood. Rent $1,000 a month. Old building, no elevator, third floor. Basic appliances, deficient heating. The difference with their previous life was abysmal. Michael sold his Rolex Submariner for $7,000 to cover moving expenses and deposit. The watch I gave him for his 30th birthday, a perfect symbol of how his life of luxury evaporated piece by piece. Robert, meanwhile, faced his own disasters. The creditors from Eastern Quick Finance, upon finding out through private investigators about the renovation of his property, demanded immediate liquidation or foreclosure. On August 15th, Robert mortgaged the newly renovated house for $130,000 with a commercial bank. He used $85,000 to partially pay the loan sharks, $20,000 for lawyers, and legal expenses, kept barely $20,000 as an emergency cushion. The ironic paradox, the renovation financed with my stolen money, ended up saving him from loan sharks, but chained him to a bank mortgage for 30 years at 68 years of age. Linda told me all this during increasingly silent dinners. She visited Michael weekly, always returning with a pained expression. One day in late August she confessed, "Seeing your son eating cheap pasta every day, living in a tiny apartment, taking the subway because he cannot pay for gas. It is devastating, William. It is educational," I corrected without emotion. For years he lived, believing luxuries were automatic rights. Now he learns privileges are earned with honest effort, not theft. "Will you never feel compassion?" Linda asked with genuine sadness. I looked at her directly. "I feel many things, Linda. Deep disappointment. Sadness for what could be and never will be. But compassion implies undeserved suffering. Michael deserves exactly what he is living. Every consequence was earned by his own decisions." She did not answer. She knew I was right, even though her maternal heart resisted accepting it completely. On August 31st, I received bank confirmation. Michael had made his first payment of $1,200 punctually. Albert called, congratulating me sardonically. "Your son complied. At least he has that minimum of instinctive survival." I kept the receipt in a folder labeled Michael Restitution. 99 payments remaining. 8 years and 3 months. Constant reminder that actions have permanent consequences. While Michael sank, Thomas flourished. In only 5 weeks as administrator, he had implemented rigorous financial controls that Michael always forgot to establish renegotiated contracts with suppliers, saving 18% in operating costs, identified inefficiencies that cost thousands monthly. The financial statements of August showed an increase of 22% in net margins compared to averages of the previous 6 months under Michael's management. "Your son was a terrible administrator besides a thief," commented Thomas, reviewing figures. $500,000 annually in losses due to negligence or deliberate incompetence. That revelation hurt in a strange way. I had not only raised a traitor, but an incompetent one. Linda finally verbalized what we both knew on September 2nd during breakfast. "You did the right thing, William. It hurts terribly, but it was necessary. Michael needs to learn the hard way what we could never teach him with comfort." I nodded, grateful for her understanding, although it arrived wrapped in maternal pain. Our son would face difficult years, but those years would build him into the man I failed to form, or they would destroy him completely. Either result would be entirely his responsibility. September advanced, and with it came an unexpected moment of absolute clarity. It happened on the 17th, specifically during a solitary afternoon in my home office, while reviewing documents I had been keeping since 1984. 40 years exactly of business trajectory. I had started with a bank loan of $300 to buy a used van and distribute cleaning products to small businesses. I slept 4 hours a day. I drove every delivery personally. I kept accounting in school notebooks. Miller Distributions was born literally from my hands, cracked by detergents, and my back sore from carrying boxes. 10 years later, 1994, I had a fleet of 12 vehicles and 30 employees. Annual billing, $200,000. Modest but solid. Another 10 years, 2004. I had absorbed 2 minor competitors, diversified into non-perishable food products, and expanded operations to neighboring states. 100 employees, billing $2 million annually. By 2014, 3 companies under a family holding: Miller Distributions, Logistics Midwest, Supply Chain Solutions, 280 employees total, joint billing $15 million annually, personal net worth $1.6 million, and now 2024 consolidated net worth of $5 million. Properties in 4 cities. Family house in the suburbs valued at $900,000. Investment condo in the city. Corporate office, vacation chalet, plus business stakes, investment funds, diversified bank accounts. 40 years transforming $300 initial dollars into a multi-million-dollar empire. And how did my own family see me during all that time? As an automatic bank. As an inexhaustible source of resources without a human face or feelings of its own. I remembered a conversation with Michael 3 years ago, November 2021. He had asked me for money for a vacation to Hawaii. $15,000 for 2 weeks of luxury resorts. "Dad, you have a lot of money. For you, it is nothing," he had said with amazing naturalness. For me, it was nothing. As if those resources had appeared magically, not through decades of sacrifice, calculated risks, sleepless nights, worrying about payrolls, contracts, difficult clients, economic crises. Sarah was worse. In family gatherings, she talked about when we inherit, as if my death were a simple pending administrative formality. Christmas 2022, she commented in front of guests. "William lives modestly, considering what he has. If I had his capital, I would travel constantly in first class." Linda had laughed uncomfortably. I kept silent, swallowing humiliation. Robert, since Michael met him in 2012, always treated me with barely disguised condescension. "William, with your position, you should invest in art," he told me once. "It is what truly cultured people do." As if accumulating capital through honest work was inferior to spending it on vanities to impress empty social circles. Even Linda, my wife of almost 40 years, occasionally showed that attitude. "Honey, why don't you retire already? You have enough money for 3 lives," she told me. She never understood that my work was not about accumulation, but about purpose, construction, legacy. Everyone saw me solely as a financial provider, never as a complete human being. With emotional needs, own dreams, tolerance limits. And I focused obsessively on building family wealth had allowed that dynamic. I had prioritized business growth over authentic relationships. I had confused material provision with paternal love. The result was in front of me. A son who robbed me without remorse because he never internalized. That money represented decades of dedicated life, invested sweat, assumed risks. For Michael, it was simply available liquidity he deserved by genetic accident. My phone vibrated, interrupting reflections. Message from Thomas. "September financial statements ready. Exceptional results. Review tomorrow." That night, Thomas arrived at my house with a laptop and folders. We set up in my study while Linda watched television in the living room. "William, you need to see these numbers," he said, opening spreadsheets. September marked 2 complete months under Thomas's administration. The results were extraordinary. Operating income increase of 26%, compared to average of the previous 6 months under Michael. Operating costs reduction of 19% through strategic renegotiations with suppliers. Net margin increase of 32%. How is this drastic improvement possible in just 2 months? I asked, genuinely surprised. Thomas smiled with professional satisfaction. Michael was a catastrophic administrator, William. He paid systematic overprices to suppliers, probably receiving illegal commissions as the audit discovered. He maintained excessive inventories that immobilized capital unnecessarily. He approved superfluous expenses without justification, fictitious business dinners, unjustified trips, subscriptions to services never used. I reviewed line by line. Every improvement was meticulously documented. Also, continued Thomas, I implemented a performance incentive system for warehouse staff and drivers. Productivity increased 23% the first month. Turns out people work better when their effort is recognized directly. Something obvious Michael never implemented. Projections for year end are extraordinary, said Thomas, showing graphs. If we maintain current trend, net profits will exceed best historical year by $400,000 additional. $400,000. Practically 4 times what Michael stole from me, recovered through simple administrative competence. Brother, the company you built is solid, added Thomas with sincerity. It survived even having an internal saboteur for years. Imagine what we will reach now with honest management. His words resonated deeply. Miller Distributions had prospered despite Michael, not thanks to him. My work of 40 years was so robust, it resisted years of incompetence and embezzlement. That said something fundamental about my capacity, my vision, my real value. After Thomas left, I remained a long time contemplating the window of my study. City lights flickered in the distance. 63 years of life, 40, dedicated to building something significant. For what exactly? For an ungrateful son to loot it? For a family to take it for granted? For working until death, handing everything to those who never valued the sacrifice involved? For the first time in decades, a radical question crossed my mind. What do I really want for the years I have left? The answer surprised me by its immediate clarity. I wanted to live for myself. I wanted to enjoy what was built. I wanted to wake up without the weight of family expectations. I wanted to experience genuine freedom before it was too late. That night, while Linda slept, I searched the internet for coastal properties in Santa Barbara, California. A city I always loved but never had time to enjoy properly. Perhaps it was time to change that radically. During the first weeks of October, Robert's collapse accelerated dramatically, providing me with a complete perspective of how all that web of manipulation disintegrated under the weight of its own lies. On October 3rd, I received an unexpected call from Mark Evans, the investigator I hired months ago. William, I thought you would be interested to know that Robert is having serious problems with dangerous people. Explain, I asked, intrigued. 2 intimidating-looking men visited his home yesterday afternoon. Heated argument at the entrance. Neighbors called the police, but the guys left before they arrived. I made discreet inquiries. They belonged to Eastern Quick Finance, that loan shark operation I mentioned in my previous report. So the loan sharks were not satisfied with Robert's partial payment, Mark continued. Apparently $85,000 that Robert paid them in August barely covered original capital of $70,000 plus accumulated interest until that moment. But the clauses of his contract specify penalties for delay that keep generating debt. Now they claim $50,000 additional dollars. $50,000 more? The vicious cycle of predatory lenders. Does Robert have resources to pay them? I asked. Impossible. He spent everything on the bank mortgage and barely has $20,000 emergency left. He is completely trapped. That night, I investigated deeper using banking contacts. I discovered that Robert's mortgage had a monthly payment of $1,000 for 360 months, 30 years at his 68. He would finish paying at 98 years of age. Statistically impossible. His retirement pension was $1,800 a month. After paying the mortgage, he had $800 left for all other expenses. Food, utilities, medications, house maintenance. Subsistence barely above the poverty threshold. The luxury renovation financed with my stolen money had financially enslaved him until his death. Poetic justice. On October 9th, Linda returned from visiting Michael with a haggard face. She sat on the living room sofa with a dejected expression. William, Michael, and Sarah's situation is worse than I imagined. Their apartment has dampness on walls. Heating works halfway noisy neighbors at all hours. Sarah is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I drank my tea without commenting. But the worst is the tension between them, continued Linda. Sarah blames Michael constantly. She says he ruined their lives to please his father-in-law. They fight every day. Yesterday, Michael mentioned he is considering divorce because he can no longer stand the reproaches. Marriages based on access to money rarely survive when money disappears, I observed with clinical pragmatism. Linda looked at me with a mixture of sadness and recognition. You are right. Sarah never truly loved Michael. She loved the lifestyle you provided indirectly. Exactly. On October 14th, something revealing happened. Robert tried to contact me directly. He sent me an extensive email starting with elaborate apologies for misunderstandings and concluding with a desperate request for a loan of $50,000 to resolve temporary situation with aggressive creditors. I deleted the message without replying. 5 days later, he sent me a second email, even more pathetic. William, I know I made grave mistakes, but think of Sarah, your daughter-in-law, part of your family. Help me and you will be helping her too. These men are dangerous. I need urgent solution. Again, I deleted without response. Robert had systematically orchestrated the theft of $118,000, using my son as a manipulable tool. Now he wanted me to rescue him from the consequences of his own criminal decisions. The audacity was almost admirable in its absolute lack of shame. On October 22nd, Linda informed me that Sarah had left Michael temporarily. She moved with her parents, Robert, and her mother, who had remained invisible throughout the drama. According to Linda, Sarah could no longer tolerate living in misery and needed time to think. Real translation. She needed to escape the reality of being married to an ordinary man without extraordinary resources. Michael was left alone in that apartment working 10 hours a day in a logistics warehouse, returning to an empty home eating cheap frozen food, paying religiously his $1,200 monthly because he knew failure meant prison. Linda cried frequently during those weeks. Seeing your son destroyed like that, William, is heartbreaking. Seeing your father robbed like that is also heartbreaking, I replied with calculated hardness, but apparently that suffering doesn't count. Linda had no answer for that. On October 29th, I reviewed payment records. Michael had complied punctually for 3 consecutive months. August, September, October. $3,600 recovered out of $118,000 total. 97 installments remaining. I also reviewed Thomas's financial statements. October marked an exceptional trend. Profits exceeded projections by 18% additional. 3 consecutive months of sustained growth. Thomas called me excited. William, we just closed a contract with a national supermarket chain for exclusive distribution in the Midwest region. Value $2.2 million annually. It is the biggest contract in company history. A contract Michael would have never secured because he lacked the discipline, credibility, and competence necessary. When do we start operations? I asked. January 1st, 2025. We will need to hire 15 additional employees and acquire 4 new trucks, but projected profitability is extraordinary. January 1st, start of a new year, start of a new era for Miller Distributions. That night, drinking whiskey alone in my study, I made a mental calculation. I had lost 38 years raising a son who betrayed me, 5 years trusting him with administration that almost ruined me, 4 months being actively robbed, total almost 43 years of my life linked to someone who turned out to be a complete fraud. I was 63 years old. Statistically, maybe 20 years of healthy, active life remaining if luck accompanied me. Was I going to waste those 20 years carrying the weight of an irreparable relationship, living in a house full of painful memories, maintaining a family structure that only brought me disappointment? I opened my laptop and resumed the search started weeks ago. Properties in Santa Barbara, beautiful coastal city, temperate climate, exceptional gastronomic culture, relaxed pace of life. I found the perfect condo. 1,300 square feet. Third floor, wide balcony with direct view of the ocean, completely renovated, bright, modern. Price $700,000, I calculated quickly. Selling the family house for $950,000, I had $250,000 free after buying the condo in Santa Barbara. More than enough to live comfortably for years while Thomas administered companies, generating constant dividends. I scheduled an appointment with a real estate agent for the following week. It was time to take a decision everyone would consider radical, selfish, incomprehensible. But for the first time in decades, it was a decision solely mine, taken for my own benefit, without considering expectations of a family that never considered mine. Freedom tasted strangely terrifying and intoxicating simultaneously. On November the 5th, 2024, I flew to Santa Barbara, a flight of 5 hours that I used to reflect on the magnitude of what I was about to do. It was not simply a change of residence, it was a complete reinvention of life at 63. The real estate agent, Christina, waited for me, a woman of about 45, professional absolute knower of the local market. Mr. Miller, delighted to meet you personally. I have prepared visits to 4 properties that meet your criteria, she said, shaking my hand. I appreciate your efficiency, but really only one interests me. The apartment on Ocean View Drive I saw online. Christina smiled. Excellent choice. It is an exceptional property. Let's go directly. The apartment exceeded photographs. 1,300 square feet, distributed intelligently. Large living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Modern kitchen, completely equipped. 2 spacious bedrooms. 2 bathrooms with quality finishes. A terrace of 300 square feet with panoramic view of the Pacific. Standing on that terrace, breathing sea breeze, contemplating waves breaking softly against the beach, I felt something I had not experienced for decades. Absolute peace. It is perfect, I declared after 15 minutes walking through every corner. What is the seller's situation? Is there room for rapid negotiation? Christina consulted her tablet. Owners are a retired couple moving to Florida for health reasons. Published price is $700,000, but they are motivated to close quickly. If you offer $680 with cash payment and closing in 30 days, they probably accept immediately. Offer $690 with closing in 20 days. Total payment in cash via bank transfer. No financing, no contingencies. I want signature before month end. Christina's eyes lit up. That is a very attractive offer. I will contact right now. While she made calls, I walked again through that empty space, imagining my future life there. Waking up early, contemplating sunrise over the bay, breakfasts on the terrace with newspaper and coffee, daily walks on the beach, cooking courses, excursions to nearby vineyards. Life without stressful business meetings, without calls from a traitorous son, without weight of family expectations. 20 minutes later, Christina returned, radiant. They accepted. $690,000. Closing November 25th. We can start paperwork now. I signed a check as a deposit that same afternoon. On the flight back, I began logistical planning. First critical step, sell the family house. Property of 5,000 square feet in a premium zone. Wide garden pool, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. Estimated value between $900,000 and $1 million, according to current market. I contacted a luxury real estate agency. The next day, November 8th, an appraiser arrived performing exhaustive evaluation. Conclusion: $950,000 was a realistic price, considering location, impeccable state, and current demand. How long to sell? I asked. Properties of this caliber take between 3 and 6 months average, explained the appraiser. I do not have 6 months. I need sale closed before year end. What price guarantees speed? If you list at $890,000, probably sell in 45 days. It is a very attractive offer that will generate immediate interest. Do it. $890,000 immediate availability for visits, quick closing, incentivized. That night came the inevitable moment. Talking with Linda, I found her in the kitchen preparing dinner. I sat on the island bench watching her while she cut vegetables. 39 years together. 40 in 2 months. Decades of shared history. Linda, we need to talk about something important. She put down the knife, perceiving seriousness in my tone. She sat in front of me, wiping hands on a kitchen cloth. I have made a decision about my future. About our future. I began measuring words carefully. I bought a condo in Santa Barbara. I am moving there permanently before year end. Linda looked at me without comprehending initially. Vacation condo? That sounds wonderful, honey. We can... Not vacation, I interrupted softly but firmly. It is permanent residence. I sold this house. It is already listed with a real estate agency. In approximately a month and a half, we will have buyers. The color disappeared from her face. You sold our house without consulting me. Technically, it is in my name exclusively since 1992. Legally, it did not require consultation, but you are right that morally, I should have discussed it with you first. I did it this way because I needed the decision taken before being persuaded to change it. Linda stood up, walking nervously through the kitchen. I don't understand, William. What is happening? What is happening is that I turned 63, having dedicated 40 of them building an empire for a family that betrayed me, underestimated and exploited. Michael robbed me. Robert manipulated me. Even you, Linda, for years saw me mainly as a financial provider. That is not fair, she began with tears forming. It is absolutely fair, I continued calmly. How many times in the last decade did you genuinely ask about my dreams? Not about financial statements. How many conversations did we have about what I want to experience in life? Not about what I can provide materially. Linda kept silent because she knew I was right. I have statistically 15 or 20 healthy years remaining. I am going to live them for me, in a city I love with a rhythm I choose without carrying the weight of toxic relationships. In me? She asked with a small voice. I looked at her directly. You have a choice, Linda. You can come with me to Santa Barbara, build a new life together, just us two without interferences from Michael or family dramas. Or you can stay close to our son, supporting him as the mother you are. I will respect any decision you take, but I need you to understand. I am leaving anyway, with or without you. She cried silently for several minutes. Finally, she asked, when do you need my answer? Moving December 10th. You have a month to decide. Linda nodded without being able to speak more. She went up to the room, leaving me alone in the kitchen. The following 20 days were a whirlwind of activity. Constant visits from potential buyers, selection of furniture to donate, sell, or take to Santa Barbara. Meetings with Thomas, transferring final responsibilities and establishing remote communication. On November the 22nd, a young couple of entrepreneurs offered $870,000 with closing December 15th. I accepted. On November the 25th, I signed deeds for the apartment in Santa Barbara, remotely. It was officially mine. Linda finally gave me her answer on November the 28th, during a quiet breakfast. I will stay here, William, close to Michael. He is my son, and I cannot abandon him in his most difficult moment, but I will visit you monthly. I nodded without surprise or resentment. I understand and respect your decision. Our marriage did not end formally, but transformed into something completely different. On December 10th, a moving truck left for California with my essential belongings. I began a new life, alone, free, finally owner of my own destiny. On December 11th, 2024, I woke up for the first time in my apartment in Santa Barbara. It was 6:30 in the morning. Dim light of dawn filtered through windows, illuminating softly the still, semi-empty living room. I prepared coffee in the newly christened kitchen and went out to the terrace wrapped in a thick robe. The temperature hovered around 50 degrees fresh, but invigorating sea breeze. The Pacific Ocean extended infinitely in front of me, waves breaking rhythmically against the golden sand. First morning of my new existence. No meeting scheduled, no employee waiting for instructions, no traitorous sun generating dramas. Just me, my coffee, and the ocean. I felt something strange in the chest. It took me several seconds to identify it. Pure happiness, without nuances or conditions. During the following weeks, I established pleasant routines that contrasted radically with my previous life. I woke up naturally between 6 and 7 without alarms. I walked an hour and a half on the boardwalk, observing early surfers, habitual runners, old people walking dogs. I had breakfast in different cafes trying local specialties. At 10, I took cooking classes. I learned to prepare seafood complex dishes. I cooked for myself, enjoying the complete process from selection of ingredients in the market to final presentation on plate. Afternoons dedicated to readings postponed for decades. Hemingway, Steinbeck, authors. I always wanted to read deeply, but never had time. Thomas sent me weekly reports by email. Companies prospered extraordinarily under his management. December would close with record profits, $500,000 above the best previous year. Contract with the supermarket chain would start January, bringing massive additional growth. Brother, everything works perfectly. Enjoy your deserved retirement, wrote Thomas on December 18th. Retirement. Interesting word. I did not feel retired. I felt finally active in what really mattered, living consciously. Linda kept her promise, visiting from December 20th to 22nd. I picked her up at the airport. She looked tired, aged. Stress of mediating between distant husband and ruined son took a visible toll. I showed her the apartment, the city, my new routines. We walked on the beach, dined in a spectacular restaurant. "You are different, William," she observed during that dinner. "More relaxed, more alive." "I am being myself for the first time in 40 years, I replied honestly, without roles to fulfill, without expectations to satisfy. Simply William. She took my hand over the table. "I regret not having understood before how much you needed this. How much all that suffocated you. You couldn't understand it because I didn't understand it myself. I was so focused on building, providing, fulfilling, that I forgot to ask myself what exactly I was building for." Linda returned home on the 22nd. Our marriage existed now in a strange but functional format. Genuine affection, weekly phone conversations, monthly visits, separate lives, but respectfully connected. Christmas Eve of December 24th, I passed completely alone. I prepared an elegant dinner for one. Scalloped sea bass, homemade cheesecake white wine, classical music in the background. At 9 at night, my phone vibrated. Number Michael. First time he tried to contact me directly since July. I looked at the illuminated screen for 10 seconds. Then I blocked the number permanently. There was no rage in that gesture, simply absolute clarity. That relationship had ended. Keeping the door open would only prolong mutual pain without real possibility of healing. Michael would have to build his life without me, exactly as I was building mine without him. On December 31st, the last day of the year, I went up to a viewpoint overlooking the coast. I contemplated the complete bay extending majestically under a clear sky. I reflected on the extraordinary year, concluding: March, discovery of betrayal. July, devastating confrontation. December, total rebirth. I had lost a son, transformed a marriage, abandoned the city where I lived almost all my life. But I had gained something infinitely more valuable: self-respect, complete autonomy, inner peace. I understood a fundamental truth that decades of business success never taught me. The most important asset is not measured in dollars or properties. It is measured in the capacity to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize a worthy man who took correct decisions when they were most difficult. 63 years building for others. The rest of my life I would build for me. I descended as night fell. City lights began to turn on, creating a luminous spectacle over the darkened bay. I walked slowly toward my apartment, savoring the night breeze, urban sounds mixed with constant waves, intoxicating sensation of belonging, finally to my own history. I did not know exactly what the future would bring. Maybe extensive trips to Europe, maybe new deep friendships, maybe even unexpected romance in this late stage. What I did know with absolute certainty: never again would I allow anyone to define me. solely by what I could provide materially. Never again would I sacrifice my happiness on the altar of others' expectations. Never again would I confuse genuine love with disguised economic dependence. I entered my home, closed the door, leaving behind a painful but transforming year, and toasted silently with a glass of champagne for the man who finally learned the most important lesson. True wealth does not consist of how much you accumulate for others, but in how much you live authentically for yourself. And I, William Miller, retired businessman, disenchanted father, reborn man, finally was truly rich. If you like this story, support us with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave us your opinions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box that appears on the left. Thank you for joining us.